Hello and welcome to the Spain online event. My name is Jeffrey Boakye, but that's not important because we're here today to celebrate is fair? The publication of Advocate, A Voice from the Margins, written by none other than Lennina Ofori. Lennina, you're here.
I'm here.
I hope that was a good enough fanfare introduction. Welcome for you.
It was good.
Looking resplendent as ever. I always say that because I feel like we should recognise, this is a thing. This is a thing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Make yourself comfortable.
Cool.
There's
I've got
so
coffee
much
as
to
well.
talk about here.
All right, let's go.
And honestly, I mean, as someone that's written a couple of books myself, debut, yeah?
Yep.
First book.
First.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling happy.
Yeah?
Happy and humbled, to be honest.
What do you mean?
I mean, seeing something that like you have ideation for, and then obviously it grows because when you're writing, it's not an easy process. So you almost feel like, it's going to be one way. And actually, when I think about my first draft, oh my God, horrendous and embarrassing. But now to have it as a book and to have it out in the world, it is humbling because actually it's a piece of me as well. And I feel very warmed by it. Like at first I was overwhelmed, but now I'm just like, yeah, this feels really good and it feels right.
I mean, one of the first things I want to say that I always forget to say is thank you.
Oh, bless you.
No, seriously, because you've written from such a personal place in this book. There's so much of you, your story, your life, and you've opened that and shared it. So this is a book that's important to read, and I feel like it was important for you to write.
Yeah.
Is that a fair place to start? Is this a book that you feel like you had to write?
Yeah, I think I felt like an urgency in some respects because for me personally, I'm quite private. Even though when I'm out in an environment, you think, oh yeah, she's really sociable, but I like my house and I like being inside the house with my family or just with my ecosystem. Yeah. And for me to put all of this on paper is actually unnecessary. My career is good. Yeah. So it's not like I'm doing it like to get a career break, etc. There's lots of stories and like nuanced experiences I think other people have that are not operating from a similar place that I am now that will never be able to share them. And also I feel that there's a lot of people who don't feel heard and actually might see themselves in some of my stories and what I've been through and my experiences that are within this book. So yeah. See?
I mean, how would you even define it? Because one might say it's a memoir. Is it at that point the eyes are rolling slightly? All right, so not one memoir. One might say autobiographical, but at the same time, it's sort of it's kind of essay as well. There's an element of information. I mean, how do you define it first for someone that's not read Advocate at all? Like elevator pitch.
Oh my God! But then if I talk about like ethnography, which is a lot of the work that I do, and like almost lived experience. Yeah. That's really important now. It's important to hear the counter narrative, not the dominant narrative that's out there, and other people speaking for those who are deemed as marginalised, etc. So for me, it is auto-ethnography. Okay. And in some way that is part memoir, but then I also feel like I've been through a lot of amazing things and quite hard things that couldn't fit in that book. So it would be hard for me to say it's a full memoir. And I haven't even lived my life yet. Do you get what I mean? I'm 42, so I've kind of lived maybe half of it.
Okay, yeah. We're the same vintage. We're technically geriatric millennials, by the way. That's what we're called.
And we're actually middle-aged. Sorry, but
go on.
No one likes to hear that when they're like 42, that they're middle-aged, but you actually are. Because generally people think, like you're lucky if you get to 70. We're 42, so we're over half.
Double that.
So what's that? It's middle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Middle and beyond.
80 plus?
Exactly, exactly.
Right. We'll be there, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to live a long life.
Good. We'll be fine.
I'm not planning to stay here with this weather, though, to be honest.
Really?
No, I don't think I could. Because it's so cold. It's too cold, it's too wet. Like, when I get older, I think, to preserve my bones, I won't be here. But anyway, we digress.
No, listen, you're a very sunny person, actually.
Very.
And it leads me to the question, why now? I mean, let's go back. Let's go back to before Advocate was a thing.
Okay.
Has this book been in your head your whole time? Is this something that you have been thinking about since you were young? Or is this something that came to you as you hit your middle age and thought, you know what? I need to do some... Hey, listen, you started it.
It's true, I did. Do you know what? Backstory. I thought my first book would be poetry. And... I did have ideation for like a book which would have like some of the anecdotes from my life, etc. but I thought I'd be able to weave poetry within it. And it kind of was like a cushion, I can't lie. And Charmaine, when she read them, she was like, "These are amazing, but like I want to know about that part, like the book part."
Oh, okay. So you actually had the poems.
Yeah, I had the poems, and actually,
so Charmaine Lovegrove.
Yeah, Charmaine Lovegrove. Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
And for me, that was really a beautiful experience because I know that I was going to write a book, but I actually thought I'd start with poetry to ease myself in. And actually, one of the poems I turned into a film, which we'll talk about maybe not today. But
just drop that in there. Yeah. What do you mean? It's like it's randomly I turned into a film.
But it was actually, there's a time for everything. Okay. And for me, when I have conversations with people, or even in my work, I'm always thinking about the counter narrative. And I think the reason why I think about it so much is because I know that I have the counter narrative within me. And that means I know there's a lot of people that I'm around who also have the counter narrative, they may look one way to some people, but what they've lived, you wouldn't dream of it. You would never know. So when people are speaking for us as a group, it's actually quite annoying. And then I feel like, a lot of us, when we're complaining, oh, it shouldn't be like this. And I actually don't like complaining unless I'm going to take some action.
Okay.
So I felt like with the book, it almost was that action, because I spend a lot of time on like commissions where I'm asking people about their lived experience so that we can ready the system for change. So I have to get all of this kind of verbatim conversation and bring it back to people. And I'm their safe space. And a lot of the reason why I'm in a safe space is because I am a Black woman.
Yeah.
So they actually have some type of connection and synergy with me. So if I can ask that many people their lived experience, I feel like it shows integrity to the work that I do, that I share some of my lived experience, right?
I see. Oh, man. You spun me a little bit there.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. In a good way. In a good way. I mean, us. It's powerful. When I hear that, as a Black British, male Black British author, I hear us, I'm thinking about the Black diaspora, What does us mean to you?
It means the Black women who have struggled. It means the Black women who are actually excellent. I think I write that in the intro, that are amazing, who are magnificent, but are overlooked. It means our mothers, our grandmothers. It means my brothers, my Black sons, my husband, and all of the amazing Black people that I see who are trying to break glass ceilings, who have broken glass ceilings, but it's painful, who I can't even see because they're so marginalised. That's the us. And then there's the us that is women, because the intersectionality that I face as a woman means that actually I have colleagues who have turned into friends who are white women, and actually some of us have got some shared experience, but however, when we discuss it, even though there's nuances, theirs may not have the slight razor at the end of it, but we still can have that connection based on that experience. So I suppose there's the intersectionality of it all, isn't it? Like the race and the gender, and then also the class. Like there's an us I'm from Tottenham originally. I don't live there now, but I'm from Tottenham, and I'm not ashamed that I'm from Tottenham, but I know that when you're living there, and as soon as you speak about it, people are like, oh my God, like grown people, like, and Black people and white people as well. Like, it's not just like white people saying it to me, it's also Black people. Oh, you came from Tottenham, oh, okay. So I think that there's stigma attached with postcodes.
Yes.
And there's an us there with that for me, because I understand that. And I've lived that. And I think it's unfair because you still have greatness when you're operating in that space. It has nothing to do with the N17 or the M15 or the SE, whatever else. And I think that's really, really painful. And if you don't have anyone who is speaking up about that, then the dominant narrative is massive out there. Like even with this book, I'm hoping that I can permeate some of that, but I'm just one book. So imagine if we all was lifting up our voices, then how that would kind of start shattering some things.
See, this is why I said thank you. Because you're speaking, no, seriously, because you're speaking to lived experiences, plural, that are very much marginalised. It's in the title, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Often maligned, definitely misunderstood, or misrepresented,
stereotyped.
It makes it a complex web. You've talked about, your black identity, being a woman, being a working class black woman, and so on and so forth. But there's a clarity that comes through here, like that comes through your narrative, which was incredibly accessible and easy to be with you on this journey. I want to go to something which struck me like really early on when you were talking about the margins.
Yeah, it's quite a funny analogy.
the margins, and you said it's the part of the paper where I could make a mess. You know, just talk me through that, because what does it mean to be marginalised for you? That's kind of what my question is.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
I think it's very different from what it was when I was younger, obviously. Like I had lots and lots of things linked to me that, like where I lived, being a young mum, all of these things kind of put me in the margins more. But I learned from the terminology margin, in a very oxymoronical way, in a private school in Tottenham, which is crazy, because when I talk about it, people are like, where was there a private school in Tottenham? Like, where did this exist? But it existed, honestly, I was there.
You didn't dream it wasn't a fever dream.
No, literally, it was a beautiful place to be for me, because I loved learning. And our headmistress, Miss Hall, like everything had to be very perfect, and it made me quite pedantic, to be honest, and maybe that would have been part of my character anyway, but I think it was a lot to do with her. And very meticulous about the way things looked. And we done, obviously when we were writing like for English or whatever else, we might do like a spelling and we try it out in the margins. And if we done maths, we kind of done our working out in the margins. So like, obviously that wasn't the important part. That was where the tests were.
Right.
So for me, like, and I wrote that exactly probably how I'm going to say it, it's verbatim, but it's like, it clicked when I went into like a different level of academia, that actually the words have a lot of power. I knew that before academia, but when I was in academia, I realized like there's a weightiness to words. So if something's like in the margins, and I'm always seeing these margins and these tests and like writing out and scribbling out there, because actually the main body of this piece of paper is really important, isn't it? You know how it was, like you don't want to mess up, you do the double line underneath and the rest of it. You'd never really want to cross out, you might test out first over there in the margins. So to me, that's what happens. A lot of the tests and trials happen and the errors happen over there, but no one can see them. They can just be erased. Like we don't matter. And for us as well, who are in the margins, I think we get quite used to being unseen and getting on in there. Not all of us, and that's not a demonization, obviously, but it's just a reflection and observation.
Yeah, definitely.
That when we're over there where all the tests and trials are being done, sometimes we can even be grateful that they're being done, you know, like with gentrification, and when they come around and decide to touch up the area a bit, like sometimes the gentrification is not even as seen to some people, because they're like, oh, at least we're getting this and at least we're getting that. But then in the end, we're kind of erased, like when we do the working out in the margins, right? That's how I see it. I see it like it's very pushed to the side. It's very othered. It's very unthought of, uncared for.
Yes. And at the same time, I can see there's a level of empowerment that comes from that vantage point. You know, I'm talking to you now, like I've met you on social media, but social media is not a real place. This is like the first time we've like chatted, and I can see that you've not only got a level of insight that comes from experience, but there's a level of analysis and there's a level of knowledge that I felt as I was reading. I was learning things from perspectives that I don't have, because I didn't have a child as a quote unquote teenage mum. You know, I didn't grow up I grew up in Brixton, so not a million miles away. But you know, I'm not a black woman. I'm the youngest of three, and my two older sisters are definitely black women. So I saw the world through their eyes. But reading your book, I got a sense of these perspectives and insights, right, which you will learn from. So that marginalised position is actually like a vantage point. Do you feel, long way around to get to the question, but do you feel empowered at this point through these marginalised experiences, which we'll talk about?
I think in some respects, yes, because I think I've got layers to myself. I have depth. And that's like, obviously I'm studying. I work on really amazing projects, and I probably operate in some respects to some other people who see themselves marginalised now. they may see me as I am not marginalised anymore, that I operate from a place of privilege. And in some respects, I do know that I do. However, I still experience marginalisation myself. But I do feel that the lived experience of my marginality has empowered me. Because as I said, like I'm full as a person, very full. I have a lot to give out. I think if I arrived at where I am now without some of this experience, I don't know if I would be arrogant. I don't know how I would be. Because it's easy to say, oh, I would be this way, I would be that way. How would we know? Because all of these stories that I've written in here, that are my truths, that are harsh realities from my life, are what have made me who I am now. Right. Without one element of like what someone would say, oh, would you wish that never happened? Of course, in some respects, I would wish something never happened. But had it not happened, would I be me? So of course, I'm very empowered to be able to now sit and share these stories to help other people, hopefully, to be able to break these myths that are out there, and also to kind of help to eradicate this lack of critical thinking that's out there, whereas people think that they can actually just come to decisions about people and situations in one Instagram post or one news headline. How can you possibly ever figure out somebody or someone's life in a millisecond or even 10 seconds or a day or 2 days? It's impossible. Even if I'm sharing space with someone for 2 weeks, I can get a gist of them and I may be able to discern certain parts of them, but I don't know them. And I think that's something very scary for me, that a whole group of society, be it race or gender, has been spoken for because they come from a certain place, have a certain lineage. So therefore people think they can say, well, they're like this. How can you say that? You don't know them. You don't know what their upbringing was like. You don't know what their childhood was like. You don't know their school years. You don't know their fears, their hopes, their aspirations. You know nothing about them. So what we do is, like, we have a lot of these generalizations and acronyms, which are wonderful, which I hate actually. I love them sometimes, but a lot of them I don't, which actually just stick a label on someone and allows people to think, oh, I get that about that group, or I get that about that person. Oh, teen mum, this. Black man, that. Unemployed, long term, that means that this is, but you have no clue until you sat down and actually listened to their story. So, long answer for that question. Yes, I feel empowered.
Too right. I'll give you a standing ovation, it's true. This is why the book's a gift though, because you delineate the experiences that you had to draw these broad conclusions and to just illuminate these conversations. You just mentioned upbringing, childhood, acronyms. There's a bit in the book when you talk about NEET, NEET. What was it? Not in education.
Employment or training.
Right. And then if we kind of flip it a bit, you go back to this term that was coined. When was it? Latchkey.
Latchkey kid.
Is that from like the 60s or something?
But I think it was actually first I think it's the 1930s.
Okay.
And then it came back up again when they were looking at Harlem. But obviously they were focused on a black area again.
Right, because poverty and the proximity to poverty.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because of that lens and obviously that bias that was already there was a demonization. It wasn't looking at it from a lens of, oh, black woman is trying to ensure that her child is looked after and has, a roof over their heads and has the right level of income, etc. It was actually these young people are going to be orphaned. They're like orphans. And actually there's neglect, etc. And potentially there was neglect, but when you don't unpick that word and you don't look at the backstory to that neglect, what it does is it frames the adult as like a devil. And actually it was somebody who was trying to do their best in a society that was not built for them and actually was built against them.
See, these are the stories, right? Like these are stories that I think are going to become so valuable as society, particularly in like parts of London stuff, develops, gentrification. There are communities that have had whole experiences of just getting on that you can really learn from. And it's like social history, So your childhood, we're a similar vintage. Like when I was reading about the whole latchkey.
I love the word vintage
I
at
know,
this point.
it's my euphemism. I don't know, there might be something better to say, but I was reading about like young Lennina and I was like, oh my goodness, I could see parallels to my upbringing as well, Let's do the millennial thing, like the nostalgia thing. Are you happy with the way that you came up, this idea of having some independences, you know, when you were home alone at times, you kind of like living in a village, a community that wasn't the nuclear family and so on and so forth, having a bit more maturity at times than maybe you wanted or needed. I mean, these are some of the themes that I think a lot of readers will definitely be like, will resonate with, especially us lot that have grown up without helicopter parents, basically.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? Because that's kind of, I saw a lot of that in the book, this journey towards independence, autonomy, agency. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think it's fair, but what I'd say is, I don't know, I'm kind of neither here nor there about that element. And the reason why is because the latchkey kid terminology is something I never knew. It was something we wouldn't even dream about, like complaining, like we're going home and being by ourselves. There was no question to that. Like there was no kind of interrogation of why am I by myself, because there was other families who done it, and I knew some families who didn't, but I still didn't question it because I knew how our family ran. For me personally, like obviously I'm a parent now myself, and my children are definitely not latchkey kids. I think that if someone's not home, I'll have a message. What's going on? And there's a lot of them anyway. I've got a lot of children, so it was myself and my little brother at home. And for me, I did have a lot of responsibility, but upon reflection, as I said, like in the book, it makes me respect my mum so much because having to make that decision about going to work and not being able to pick your children up yourself as a woman, as a mother, I don't know, I can't speak for every mum, I'm really careful with this, but for me personally, there are things that I've had to like kind of wrestle with, and myself and my husband, we've had to like, I call it jigsawing in the book. Jigsaw, like our lives, our diaries, our calendars together to ensure that they've always had this kind of wraparound service, which wasn't happening in my house. And the reason why we're like that is because of what his life was very different from mine. Like he did have that in some respects. He had that kind of like old Ghanaian grandma who can support, and she's helped me, etc. But with me, it was me picking up my brother, and
so there wasn't a village in that sense.
It's weird. It's like there was seasons for the village.
Okay.
And like the village also was always apparent on the weekend, and I would go to my nan's on a Friday evening. I would be collected by my aunt sometimes, but also thinking about the age, it's like my nan wasn't yet retired when her daughter was actually also raising her family.
Gotcha.
And there's something about that kind of black woman working long.
Man, listen,
years, mad
when you write quote,
yes,
you know, feeding on the black woman's ancestral resilience, you know, this idea of hard work being a defining feature of black femininity, black motherhood, black matriarchy, completely unfairly as well. This like extra hidden labor that black women have to do. I feel like society is still wrestling with that, like to this day, like not understanding what black women go through.
I think so, but then that goes back to the marginality as well, and also it goes back to the normalcy of it.
Okay.
So culturally, like when I was growing up, as latchkey kids, just to take it back to link it to that point, my mum obviously wasn't there all the time to cook dinner, etc. It wasn't neglect. Because there was food that we would just like kind of make something of ourselves. And it was the greatest either.
It was toast, I know.
Or piece of bread, or you know what I mean, or a pie, or I don't know, frozen food, whatever else. And but on the weekends, like the meals that my nan made, probably also in the week for her household, would have been very much real West Indian food. And when you're trying to keep that alive in your house, or even to, I don't know, encompass black womanhood, which is inclusive of almost a tick box of ensuring that you can cook, ensuring your house is clean, making sure that you're stern with your children, making sure that you know where they are, making sure they're getting good grades. There's lists upon lists, right? And then you have work, and that work is almost, it can be, and this is no dramatization, a battlefield. Because even if it's not a battle with the words, the mouths with you and colleagues, it'll be a battle of the mind. What are they thinking? Oh, when am I going to be promoted? All right, how do I have to be? Okay, can I go for that role? Okay, are they going to like accept me in this sector? And thankfully, I'm not in that position anymore, but it doesn't mean I don't ever have little questions, because you are dealing with sometimes unconscious bias or very conscious bias.
Exactly. Covert racism,
exactly.
or overt racism even. Yeah.
And because of those things, they all come into play. Then you have to go home, and then you go home to be all and everything again.
Wow.
And I think that's very heavy, and I think we don't speak about that a lot. And I think some people don't speak about it because I think to unpick it is quite a lot in itself, because then it kind of almost questions your very identity and what you thought you had to be great, to be good.
Okay.
Because actually, do you have to do that much to be good?
Well, this is the question.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And you normalised it as well.
I don't think so. I don't think you do.
All the cliches about, having to work twice as hard to go half as far, that's compounded by the intersectionality of racism and sexism. And if you live with that gravity, with the physics of that, since the day you're born, you might not realize that you are doing something extraordinary in order just to be, And actually, if you front loaded the book with all of that, it would have been heavy. If the first chapter was just a list.
Take my time, right?
Yeah, because as you read it, it sort of like unfurls. And you get the weight.
So it's a bit gentle at the beginning. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's like it's like giant leaps into shallow waters or like small steps into deep water. One of those metaphors. You're a poet, you know what I'm trying to say.
I think so.
You know what I mean? But then that's a good tell me about the big woman.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, listen, you wrote it. Don't look at me like that.
Yeah, I know. It's like
a lot of your readers won't know what big woman means. I grew up around a lot of Jamaican people. I'm not Jamaican, but I grew up in Brixton.
Well, you know them.
I saw that and I was like, I know exactly what this is about.
I think that's really interesting because, the term adultification, when you look at it now, it's like, we get these buzzwords, and now this is like a buzzword, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of myself, my friends, a lot of people I know, we lived it. Because when you got to a certain age, all of a sudden it's like people thought you were like a big woman or a big woman. But in some respects, you also did.
Right.
But not in the way that some other people thought you did. Do you get what I mean? So like, for example, you're a young black girl, you're walking down the street. If you have a bit of a figure, etc., then you could have had people looking at you like you were a big woman.
Yeah. I saw it in Brixton.
Yeah,
men just calling out
in your uniform, or just in the summer when you're not in your uniform, but you're definitely a child.
Yes,
you're definitely a child, and that's that one side of it. That you're like an elder man can look at you and not think, oh, let me protect this little girl. Actually, let me call to her. That's quite bizarre in itself, right? So what is that about a black girl that makes her seem like an adult?
Yeah,
or that she can be sexualized? It's bizarre, but it isn't bizarre because it's very much linked to enslavement as well, isn't it? And we can't run away from that. And I don't talk about enslavement a lot in the book because there are a lot of great books that speak about it, and also I'm actually very much in the now and things that are happening in other ways, but are still linked.
Yeah, and
I think we are seen, or black girls are seen as adults. So in school, if they are speaking, or they're just being, I always speak with my hands. The fact that I'm even not moving both of them is crazy, but I think I will, as we get bit deeper, I'll be flapping around a bit more. But I've always spoken with my hands. Yeah. And, not all black girls do it, but it is quite cultural that we move. We're very, we're charismatic as well. Do you get what I mean? But we don't really get to hear those nice words about ourselves.
You get told that you're
we're loud,
or
we're aggressive,
disruptive, aggressive,
exactly, and that happens
feisty,
and that happens when we're children, and we are not allowed to just blossom into adults. We're already kind of framed as adults. So if a black girl does something, she must have known what she was doing.
Right.
Do you get what I mean? Or if a black girl speaks out about something, she might be questioned because she's a little bit more sexual. If a black girl goes missing, it isn't seen as such a, oh my gosh, a black girl's missing, because actually she looks like she can handle herself.
She can look after herself.
Are you sure she's not with this person? And you'll see it. You'll see it across the news headlines. Adultification, it affects so much of black girls' lives. And I will also advocate for black boys because it happens to them a lot, actually. But we're hearing more about that in research. But with black girls, people don't speak about it so much. It's only coming out now more because of, incidents that we've had with strip searching and
child
Q and all those type of incidents. And also because I think a lot of black girls now grown up can reflect and think, oh my God, actually that was really bad that happened to me when I was younger. How comes they didn't see I was only 10?
Yes.
Or when I was in school and I was like talking back or being a bit cheeky, why were they so punitive with me when I was only a child? And actually, if like inverted commas Sally had said something or spoken up, it would have been seen that she was assertive.
Yeah.
But I would have been seen as loud and aggressive, which actually follows us on throughout into adult life when black women are seen as aggressive or demanding or problematic. But actually, sometimes we can be verbose, or even if we're not verbose, sometimes we are actually just being assertive. And because we have been marginalised for so long, when we do speak up, the tone is very irritating to certain people's ears, or it's scary. Yeah. Not because we're scary, but because the newness of us speaking up and speaking out is something that you're not used to. So that could be quite scary.
Definitely. You see? So we're in a space now where you're writing about experiences that absolutely shine a light on these essays, really, that help us understand where we're at now.
Yeah.
That's what I got when I read Advocate. I was like, seriously, I was like, this helps me to understand where we're at now, because it's documenting experiences. That's what Charmaine did. She said, I want to know about the person behind these words.
Yeah, of course.
And then it gives you a context.
Yeah.
Right,
I'm relaxing.
All right, good. It's only taken us 32 minutes. You're relaxed now.
I was relaxed. Cool.
That's all right. Don't worry. That's a new record for me. But then, I mean, one of the things which, again, I've got some overlaps in experience with you, some broad differences. But one of the things that I would feel connects us, even before we met, is this idea of like a blackness, black identity. You talk about, I don't think you refer to it as the Black Atlantic. That's the phrase that Paul Gilroy came up with in 1993. Like us looking at America, looking at the Caribbean, looking at parts of Africa, and there was a space for us to be, the Royal McCoy, Desmond's, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, all that kind of stuff. So we have a connection there.
Of course, yeah.
What does that mean to you? Because your people are going to find you. When you write a book, people will find you. In fact, I'm sure they're finding you already. Have you had any feedback yet?
Yes.
I knew it. I called it.
I had feedback on 2 pages, which I found beautiful and amazing, because the 2 pages were when I spoke about just after I had told my mum that I was pregnant when I was 16, and on the same day I'd gone for an interview for a job and I got the job on the same day. And
that's big. That's like bang bang. That's
literally, like God was like, all right, you're not doing it my way, but I'm going to bless you. That's how I received it anyway. And I speak about that, and I just speak about that, the stigma for me as a teenage mother, but also the stigma upon my parents. Because what did they do wrong? Oh, what's happened there?
The judgment.
Oh God, they must have messed up. And that was why they held some of that anger. And I just spoke about the fact that a lot of people are quite judgmental about teenage pregnancy, but a lot of them have had their own teenage pregnancy scares, and people don't want to talk about that, because obviously outtakes in life, some outtakes are very visible and some outtakes aren't. Remember that. And not like every film doesn't show the bloopers. Comedic ones will show you, but some of the serious films you'll never know. You hear it in an interview, like something like this, right? But I'm sharing it, or having a baby like that. You can see that I've had a baby as a teenager. It's visible. But maybe being pregnant and choosing not to keep the baby, no one has to know unless you speak about it, right? So obviously those were the pages that were parted. And then I had people like just sending me messages and saying, oh my God, you made me feel like this. Oh, I've cried this morning because I remember how people looked at me when I was pregnant at uni, and like I still got my degree, but they were judging me. And some people like they actually posted it on my page that their mum was a teenage mum and like their whole family was looked down on, but she gave her the most unwavering love. And I actually know the woman like who wrote this on my page, and it really touched me because she is a powerful, amazing woman. And it just makes you think, like, why? What was the stigma about? Yes, it's not ideal to be pregnant at 16. I'm not advocating for teenage pregnancy. I'm advocating for teenage parents. The one is, if it's happened, what are we going to do to support them?
Right.
So why is the stigma like, oh my God, that happened? It could happen to anybody.
Yes. And the patriarchy says that this is the young woman, the girl's fault.
Yeah.
Because you forget that,
and that brings back the adultification, by the way, especially with black girls. Like, you must have known what you was doing.
Right.
Oh, you must have been a certain way, etc.
Yeah.
And everything that follows with that. But at 16, I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was a kid at 16. And I'm not ashamed to say I was a kid. I was a kid who had a kid. I was very blessed to get a job, so I was very responsible, and I saved every penny, and I bought everything myself.
Wow.
For that child. She's amazing. She's 25, and she's the head of music at the moment.
Come on.
She done 14 GCSEs by the time she was 15. She done 2 A levels by the time she was 15 as well.
What are you feeding this?
One
what are you feeding this kid? It's not
and
toast,
I mean,
is
like,
it?
and I mean the input and the tenacity as a teenage parent. And I'm not going to lie, the first year, it was rough. Because I still wanted to be a teenager. So it was rough. But that's when I had a really good village. That's when I had a Trinidadian stepdad who checked up and was, I don't like this, I don't like that friend. And they kept on and kept on and kept on until they could see that, all right, she's coming back to who we thought she could be or would be. So that's when I saw a village. But those pages, definitely, I knew that people might resonate with those pages, but that's 2 pages out of how many hundreds of pages.
You're going to get a lot
I'm just
of
like,
that.
oh my God, this is 2 pages. And I don't think I said earlier to like one of the dialogue team members, like, that's 2 pages that I think is deep, but it's not like the deepest part of the book.
Hey,
like,
listen, man, look, take it from me, seasoned pro, man. I've been out in these storms. You're going to get a lot of people who are going to feel seen. That
makes me feel good.
That's the game. That's the game. You write so that you express, but other people feel seen.
Yeah, that's what I want.
And they might not contact you, but they're out there, and a lot of them will contact you because you open up. It's an incredible act of vulnerability. I know that because when you write, sometimes you feel yourself pulling back a bit.
Yeah, and I mean,
did you feel that?
Of course I did.
In the process.
Oh my God, I felt myself pulling back and I felt myself breaking down. But yeah, I mean, there was parts where I was like, and I'm sure, I don't know if I can go to that, but there was a part I said where I stopped writing completely, and then, I don't know, we'll talk about that.
Was it involving Mr. Stout?
Yes, okay. It was. And I feel like, for me, it wasn't because I haven't healed from it. It's because it is a very big thing to put out there, number one. But it's also because I know that I've had lots of time to review that, to go through it, to pray, to cry, to heal. Yeah. And to forgive. And not to blame myself and all these other emotions you go through. But I know that a lot of people haven't if they've experienced that. Yeah. And it's also, how does it land with other people if they have been through that? And how am I making sure that it's almost curated, that it doesn't cause more damage? Because I'm also a trauma-informed practitioner. So when I'm writing, I'm thinking about people as well. Like, oh my God, if I say this, but then at the same time, I can't dilute the story because it's my truth. So it's like being really careful. And I had to stop and do some prayers, honestly, like God, don't let me feel ashamed. Yeah. If I feel like, because sometimes you could be ashamed of something, so you're not going to write it. But actually, is it shame or is it wisdom? So you have to weigh up what's my rationale? Why am I not saying this? Is it to protect someone? And sometimes these people deserve protecting because not these type of people like Mr. Stout, but other people, like my story is linked to other people and they're just living their lives now. So I've protected them. Yes. Because I think that's integrity. Because they're not choosing to write a book, I am, right? Yeah. But with certain elements and certain stories, you do have to tell them with all their edge and their grit and their nastiness and all the rest of it, because it is the truth, and that's where the empowerment comes. Do you get what I mean? Yeah, I feel like that was a level of vulnerability, but I feel like because I've been through so much already, that is nothing. Right. Wow. Do you get what I mean? Like, it was hard, and then I realized, like, I come to myself, I pray, I come to myself. No, but look, you went through that. Like, like, that was hard. This isn't hard in comparison to that. That's amazing. Writing that cannot be as hard as living through that. Okay. Writing that can't be as hard as overcoming that. Can it? And surviving and being and thriving. Not just surviving, actually. Thriving.
Yeah, too right. Like
so
living.
Yeah, and living and thriving past that is actually
with love, with connections,
yes.
with positive human connections.
Yeah, and
because
with joy.
and with joy. Yeah.
And with joy.
Yeah.
So like I feel like, to be honest, I think there's a lot that I've passed through that has made me okay with being vulnerable. Because like being vulnerable is I'm not saying it's nothing to make light of it, by the way, because I've got to this stage. So I'm not belittling it. I know people's experiences are different. What I'm saying is that because not enough people are open about situations, just different situations, just normal life, that they sometimes find it hard to get up, or they struggle with the laundry sometimes, or actually they find it hard to be like go to college, but they want to go to college. Just normal things I'm talking about at this point, right? Because people are not open about just normal things, and everybody has this kind of pretension of perfection.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not just because of social media, it's also due to professionalism and work and all the rest of it. Then a lot of people are like this.
Yeah.
I don't want to share. I can't say that because I'm going to look like this. What?
Yeah.
If we were all kind of just being human, do you know how like things would be great?
Yeah.
Like, so being vulnerable wouldn't even be a word. It wouldn't be in the dictionary. Being vulnerable, being open,
right?
Like being truthful.
Yeah.
Like just like, oh, I went through this, and actually it was a really bloody hard time for me, and I've overcome it, and I'm sharing it with you. Because actually there's somebody else out there that's going through that, and they need to know that, look, I done it. And it doesn't mean that because I done it, you can, but it can also make you look at the different cogs in my journey and maybe just look at that and say, you know, I could try that. Or even if you don't try any of it, just to know that that thing that happened to you wasn't right, and actually you can let go of the blame. It doesn't always have to be that the person reads and is like, oh, I'm so empowered and I want to be like you. I don't think that. You have to be really careful because everybody's journey is so different. It may not be that for everyone, and I'm fine with that. But that level of vulnerability to me is quite low level in comparison to what I've been through. Like, I'm strong, and I know I'm strong. And it's not the fake strong, by the way. It's not it's not the trope. Strong black woman. I'm strong, like in hair. In hair, I'm strong. Spiritually, I'm very strong. And it's beautiful for me to be able to do this because it's like, okay, I've overcome this. Like, come on, let's do this. Like, let's be vulnerable.
No, this is big because I'm always thinking about kind of, you know, obviously you're entering another sector, like publishing is a whole other thing, like getting the story out there. You're existing in different spaces. And what I'm thinking is, after the robots take all our jobs, right? It's coming.
I don't think they can take our jobs.
Oh, it's not going to take our jobs. No. I'm hyperbolizing. They're going to take the job. No. All that will be left is like people connecting with people.
Yeah.
That's my thesis.
Yeah.
And when you say trauma informed, like I don't think people understand how important that is across society.
Yeah.
We need our teachers, our politicians, our healthcare workers, our entertainers, our writers, our parents to be trauma informed. And when speaking to you now, I'm sort of seeing that this is someone that understands trauma, and therefore isn't shackled by it. Like it's not got you by the throat and preventing you from living.
Never, no.
But that's important, because a lot of people write books that haven't reconciled their traumas, that haven't gone into that. It leaks out. But, you know, so I was reading this, and when I got to that stuff, you know, the abuse, the traumas that you personally went through, I was like, people are going to read it and they'll do the same thing as me. I was like, you know, let me just turn everything off and let me just spend some proper time. Like, I was like, I had to spend some time with this person here, like properly, you know. And that in itself is a gift, because I really felt as though you were offering space, and I was obliged to enter that space with you.
Oh, that's so.
Which is a very powerful thing for words on a page.
Bless you.
It's true.
Well, that means that, like,
you asked me for some feedback. That's some feedback for you.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was concerned at one point. I was like, oh my God, this book needs to come with a trigger warning because. And I suppose like this interview coming out before, in a way, it is one. But I think it's nice to hear that feedback, because I know it's quite dark. And I think there's a lot of light in the book as well.
There is.
But I don't think you get light without dark. And I think like...
Now you sound wise.
Well, that's good. I've got enough grey
wise.
hairs. I think I should be given that title actually at this point. But yeah, I feel there's dark and light in everything. Do you get what I mean? Like there's only so much dark that people want to share, and I think respectfully that's up to them. But I don't think we should pretend that there's only light and there's only joy. And I think it's quite I don't know if the word's problematic, but it's, I think, interesting because I think as a Black female writer, sometimes the onus is on me or other Black female writers not to write about trauma anymore because there's a lot of things that are about Black trauma.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of Black trauma that's not healed.
Right.
And I can't pretend that that's not a fact, but it doesn't mean that we cannot talk about Black joy as well.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be careful not, and I think I'm right. I said like something along the lines that just because I'm talking about trauma doesn't mean that I am trying to appeal to white people. Actually, I'm speaking out.
Yeah.
Speaking out as an act of resistance.
Yeah.
Because actually for years we've been silenced, and such abuse that I experience, which I would say child sexual abuse, is something, especially in the Black community, if it has happened, that sometimes is not spoken about.
Right. And
that shame, because if something is like kind of kept a secret, it is usually linked to shame. But sometimes, as I've said, like with Hook speaks about privacy, and I think privacy is very important. And obviously, you don't know everything about me in that book, even though people might read it and think, oh, I know so much of her business. You don't. Do you get what I mean? Like some of these things happen, like I'm like 42, like you're hearing stuff from my teenage years, like people know stuff about me from like 25 years ago. Okay, like, well, so like I've evolved so much since then. But when you think about all of these different things that happen to us on our journeys, if some of them we're told that we should be embarrassed about, not because of the privacy, we're not sharing because of privacy and wisdom, because some things I think are for not everything for everyone, but for some other reasons is shame, then that links to the trauma.
Yes. And
then that trauma then becomes a beast, because that trauma, that's how it gets you in the chokehold. Because actually you're not allowed to speak about this trauma because actually it's shameful. So then am I shameful? Am I the thing that's dirty? Like, how can you be if this was inflicted on you? Yeah. It's impossible. So that locked awayness that I speak about, and that sharing of vulnerability and being open and not being like kind of pointing the finger at that, oh, you just wanted to write a book. Like white people could be like, oh no, poor Black woman. Yeah. No, actually.
It's definitely not that.
Yeah, it definitely is.
It's definitely not that.
It's actually, no, I see you, Black woman. Yeah. I see you, like Black woman who had to shut your mouth because actually this could cause problems. Like I see you, Black woman, like who is walking around with something that's like massive and it's heavy, and you may never have spoken about it. Yeah. What? No way. So for me, like, it's trauma, but I'm healed from it. And once you're healed from something, you can speak about it. Yeah.
That was the presiding feeling that I had, like as I got into like the final lapse of the book. This is someone who has healed, has processed, and is therefore in a position to offer these insights and these moments of illumination. That was what I was left with, you know. Good. So there you go. I don't know if that's job done for you. You know,
I don't know. I mean, like, I welcome all the feedback.
Yeah.
And, you know, you never know how a book will land with anyone. You will hope that people will enjoy your book, I'm sure. But then it also just becomes a thing like, actually, not everything is for everybody. Yeah. Some people could be like, oh my God, I can't believe she wrote that. But then someone somewhere will read that and oh my God, I needed that. Yeah. That's who that book's for.
Guaranteed.
And also for those who are kind of always assuming that they know too much and need to do a little bit more critical thinking.
There'll be a lot of that. There'll be a lot of people that see it and go, okay, advocate, I know what that word means.
Yeah.
Voice in the margin.
They're not expecting that, are they?
I get it, marginalisation, all right. We're still doing racism, it's post-2020, I get it. And they'll open it and they will not
I don't think anyone's expecting what's in there. That's one thing I do know, and that's not said from arrogance. Yeah. I just don't believe people will think that. And I think that as well is because of perception. Like, people who know me will know. that I'm a deep person. But like, you know, if you post a picture up, especially like LinkedIn, like you see like all the things I do,
LinkedIn,
and like, you know how it is.
the worst
so then,
social media.
then people will be like, oh, she's this, she's that. And then like Instagram, maybe it will look like, oh, I like to take pictures and I love clothes. People think I'm a bit of a princess. It's quite interesting. Princess? Well, I've never seen a princess who went through all of that stuff. I want to meet her. But like a lot of people can think these things just by like glancing and not knowing. And I think they're not going to respect what's in here.
You know what? First of all, before we wrap up, I want to say again, thank you so much
Bless you.
for your time, for your candor, for your vulnerability, for your insights, and for writing Advocate, A Voice on the Margins.
Thank you.
Which is a book that needs to be in hands. It's a book that needs to be written. It's a book that needs to be read. I'm saying that as someone that writes a lot of books and reads a lot of books. So thank you so much for that. What next, dare I ask? Which part of the journey are we on now? Because this is new. This is not
even out. How about that?
All right.
This is out next week.
I'm like a pushy agent.
No, but I love that. Please.
What are your hopes?
I feel like I've got so many books inside of me. And I think now that I've birthed that one, not like I'm saying I'm ready to write one tomorrow, but there was so much that I wanted to add. And I feel like there's certain chapters that deserve books, like from them, or even films. But I want to speak a lot because I have a lot to say about a lot of things. And I know a thing about a thing or two as well. I'm hoping that a lot of people will read the book, and for those who it's not there to kind of help or advocate for, they will be challenged about some of their perceptions of people. I hope people will be encouraged to think more critically and think a little bit more slowly, because everything's too quick.
Yeah.
It's too quick.
Yeah.
Like it's too, for me, I'm quite hyper, to be quite honest. Like I'm keeping quite still here, but I'm quite hyper. Everybody who knows me knows I can do quite a lot. But thinking to me is something you need to take time with, and you need to digest life. And that's what I hope this book will help people to do. Not just digesting the book, but are you actually digesting your life? Are you looking at your life and taking it in like bit by bit? Are you doing that? That's what I feel like I would hope the most, away from all the kind of things I hope to achieve and move on. Like for myself, that's like more selfish goals or whatever else. But for the book, I just wanted to make impact. Well, you know what? You've definitely done that already. Thank you so much. The book is Advocate, A Voice from the Margins by Lennina Ofori. It's out now, Dialogue Books, and I'm confident that everything you want to see happen is going to happen, because when people open up that book, they're going to get you a story and a whole lot more. So thank you so much. And thanks for this chat. Thank you so much. God bless you. We're here. We did it. We did it. All right.